In the last vignette, we were speaking about the Catholic mind, how the mind of a Catholic should function, and what must be its contents. And we mentioned the fact that the first requirement for a Catholic mind, to have a Catholic mind for that matter, is that he must possess the complete knowledge of divine revelation, or sometimes we refer to it as a complete knowledge of sacred doctrine. And in the last vignette, we were discussing the reasons why there is so much conflict, not only between the Catholic Church and those outside, but even among ourselves inside. The internal warfare, we call it. And the reason for this is because there are some of us who have all the sacred doctrines in our minds, and there are some who have less of the sacred doctrine, in which case the conflict will take place in what one have and the other does not have. This internal warfare is not between the holy and the sinners. It is between the holy and those who look holy, meaning to say they are good Christians. They are people who take care of their families, faithful to their wives, kind to their children. They have no problems with their children. They have not deceived anyone or killed or stolen from anyone. And they even go to Mass quite often. And yet the conflict is between them and those who are faithful to Christ. St. Paul mentions something about people who eat and drink the body and blood of Christ unto their condemnation. Meaning to say, these are Christians who are going to Mass and Holy Communion even quite frequently, and yet the battle is against them. These Christians really are people who are different from the faithful in what seemingly are small things. Like, for instance, should the wife work or not? The true faithful take one side and they take the other side. And of course, the answer of the faithful is the wife should stay at home. How about business? Should we go into business simply for the sake of profit or to be able to help others? And again, the faithful gives the answer to be of help to others. And those on the wrong side would say it's primarily for profit. And so goes with politicians. Will the politicians be allowed to rush judge others just because they are running for politics or not? And the faithful says, no, you cannot rush judge anybody, even for the sake of politics. In the eyes of God, there is no such thing as small thing. Everything is great before the eyes of God. If you will recall, people can go to heaven or go to hell on account of one glass of water. If you give, you can be saved. If you refuse to give, you can be lost. Now, for everyone, that is such a small thing, but you can see it can mean eternal damnation or salvation for a person. And so the same thing, they said that paradise was lost because of an apple. Well, probably it was not an apple, but assuredly, paradise was lost because of an action that we today in the world would not consider as something grievous. And this, therefore, is the importance of remembering If we are true faithful, that in the eyes of God there are no such things as little things. The manner we celebrate the sacrifice of the Mass seems to be trifling, for most priests anyhow, and yet they can do some changes which are inappropriate in the Mass. Having politics preached in the pulpit is definitely out of place in the Catholic Church. Now keep in mind that when God sends us these hundreds and thousands of small things, there are two sides, the Catholic side and the un-Catholic side. And God sends us these things for our training us in order to go to heaven, or if we remain untrained, to bring us to eternal damnation. The road to salvation, like the road to damnation, is made up of 100,000 small things. But the road towards salvation are made up of small things, but a little extraordinary than the ordinary things in the world. Like, for instance, one who is destined to be saved seek more the company of holy people and poor people rather than the rich and the famous. And those who want to enter the kingdom of heaven would rather choose the solitary life, a life of silence withdrawn from the world, rather than the company of many people. And those, of course, who want to live a life of holiness would rather run away from wealth and riches, trying to live a life of modesty and always suspicious when there is luxury and convenience and comfort that comes to them. Some of these little errors that causes the warfare inside the Catholic Church is held by people who think in this way. They think, for instance, that there are certain things in human affairs that can be separated from religion. Now, this is not only a little thing, it is a very grave error. Because the very teaching of God, the doctrine of divine providence, states that God has governance over the actions of all men. And human governance says that no man can do anything without God directly directing his action. And since human affairs is usually referred to as politics, there are people who think that politics can be divorced from religion. And this is the side of the un-Catholic Christian thinker. Now notice that I was not referring to really bad politicians. The warfare, internal warfare within the church, is between the true faithful and good politicians. But these good politicians simply do not think that their actions should be governed by religion, and so they act outside the sphere of religion. The defect of these politicians, and it is a very grievous defect, is that they are neither hot nor cold, meaning to say, they do not make decisions which are against the church, but neither do they make decisions in favor of the church. Christ had already mentioned that this kind of people, he vomits them out. And the same happens in the governance of the church, that the men of the church think that they are doing nothing bad, but if you will notice, they are neither hot nor cold. They do not teach heresies, maybe, but they do not teach the sacred doctrines of the church. So, similarly, they are neither hot nor cold. Our church is always in conflict. We have seen that the first conflict is with the world, which Satan had claimed to possess and to govern. Words which he uttered when he was tempting our Lord Jesus Christ. We also mention now that the next warfare is within the church, and this is also instigated by the devil, by making us do what we want, to do our own will. That was what precisely Satan did when he fell. He chose his will. The world will tend to drag us down to its own level and convince us it's good enough to be a Christian in that level, while our own flesh will tell us to rebel against our consciences. And so keep in mind that the only safe way that we may be free from all these dangers is for us to give up the world from our hearts and not to listen to our own personal desires. When we have given up these two, then God will open to us His revelations. God bless you.